Yes, what is the story? Welcome back to another episode with myself, Nolezy, one half of the FPL Draft. Yo, hope you had a very enjoyable and relaxing international break, but we are back. The draft waits for no one. We're back with another episode looking at this or that, international minutes, international returns, everything to do with the draft. A huge amount of effort goes into putting this together, so all we ask is hit that subscribe button, give us a follow on Instagram, so on and so forth. But other than that, let's get into it. Starting off as always with Jacksies stats section, and he has been flat out looking at injuries and some possible returns for game week 8. Martinelli is top of the list of injuries. It looked like a small muscular edema. Jaxie's gone full doctor mode here. Should be good to play if swelling settles. So he's saying look for the pressers or wait for the pressers for news on Martinelli. It might be the case of a game week or two that's out. On the same note, Arsenal, Saka, hamstring injury. Everyone's been talking about him over the international breaks. He looks like he could be good to play. Again, he has written down here, could be Arteta dark arts and, putting the opposition off slightly. But we have seen this with Saka, that he should be good to play. Lukic for Fulham, AC shoulder injury. Hwang looks like he could be out for 8 to 10 weeks. Alisson, that happened in game week 7. It looks like it could be 5 or 6 weeks, so we'll talk about his replacement. Konza has picked up, I think it was a hamstring injury as well. That looks like it might be a couple of weeks. Morgan Gibbs-White, ankle injury, anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. So, as always, Morgan Gibbs-White hot on our list or top of our list. Expected return. So some people that could be coming back in game week 8. Ramsey, Onana, McGinn, or Villa boys. I doubt all three of them will start, but they might be in contention of playing. Jensen for Brentford, which might be good. Damsgaard has a slight knock and has been playing very, very well. So you never know. If Damsgaard is not fit enough, maybe Jensen comes in for him, or we might see the mighty trio start. Carvalho, Shade, and Lewis Potter. March, I'm just reading this for the first time. March looks like could be coming back for Brighton. Unbelievable. Adingra has a slight niggle, but could be good. Reece James, I don't know about that. Brathwaite, Mikalenko look like they could be good. Shaw is a possible return. We'll talk about him today. Callum Wilson and Isaac could be in contention. Might be a week too early for Callum Wilson. Son looks like it could be okay, and Fulkrug is in the mix. So a lot of players, if they're not playing this week, more than likely will be fit and available for game week 9. Now having a look at some of the players that withdrew from international duty. Usually it's just to nurse an injury that they've been carrying and hopefully be good for game week 8. So if you own some of these, it might be positive news that they weren't on international duty, but let's go through some of the most significant ones. Adam Wharton, Garnacho, Alisson obviously, Diallo of United, Onana, Munoz, Konza, Rutter, Anderson, Havertz, Menu, Kovacic, Sells, Damsgaard, Kirkes, Gibbs-White, and Mazraoui, as well as Thomas Partey. But that Mazraoui injury, I don't know if it's been confirmed the extent of it, but that will definitely come into some of our decisions that we make today in terms of waiver picks. And finally, wrapping up our international recap, we're looking at players that got returns for their teams. Now, I don't like to look into it too much, but it's good to note that they're hitting a bit of form, because there's different systems. They're playing different teams, different managers. There's so many more variables that come into it, but it's always good. Let's have a look. Porro assist, Szoboszlai banged 2 goals, Ericsson goal and assist, Luis Diaz and Duran got a goal, Digne, Castagne, Udogi, Kulusevski all got an assist, Grealish, Trent and Rice all scored a goal, Watkins assist, Bernardo Silva goal, Bruno Fernandes assist, Johnson another goal, Nico Williams assist, and Kunku goal, Haaland banked 2, and Bruno Gomes got an assist. So a huge amount of returns and a lot of players in there that I am eyeing up for the future. So hopefully they can kind of prove me wrong and correlate them attacking returns into FPL points. As always, this podcast / YouTube is essentially made by the listener or the follower. The questions that you send into us, we formulate that, and these are some of the common questions that we have come across. The waivers and valuations, they also play into it, but we're playing a game of this or that, as usual. Let's have a little look at two possible defenders. And the first question is Luke Shaw or John Stones? Okay, if you're watching on YouTube, you will see the big green tick over Luke Shaw. Now, I know there will be doubts, but when I looked at this, Luke Shaw should come back into that team. Maybe not game week 8, but game week 9. United actually have a very good run of fixtures. Not that they're solid defensively, but Shaw has that attacking potential. Mazraouri's injury means that Dalot will probably play right back, Shaw will go left back, and that's probably our best back four in my opinion. John Stones still has a huge amount of competition between every City defender, and his attacking potential isn't massive. They haven't been that solid at the back this year, so I think if you're thinking long term, at least if Shaw's fit, which he probably won't be in 2 game weeks time, you have what I would call someone who's relatively nailed. John Stones, your guess is as good as mine. He might play every 1 out of 3 games and be very good for you, but I think I'm going for the more solid but risky in terms of injury pick in Shaw. Next one is a trade, and it's Gabriel and Bailey versus Van de Ven and Morgan Gibbs-White. So for this, I think it's pretty simple, and I'm actually going to do a double trade in this because when the person asked me this on Instagram, I thought it was Van de Ven, but they meant Van Dijk. So the Van de Ven, Morgan Gibbs-White versus Gabriel Bailey, I think that's easy Gabriel. Especially after Morgan Gibbs-White's injury, I don't think it needs too much explaining. Gabriel, top tier, one of the best defenders you can have in the game. And then Bailey as this kind of high upside midfielder. If it was Van Dijk, I still think I'd go Gabriel, because how I like to break down the trades is 1v1, and we'll see that in the next one. Gabriel versus Van Dijk, I still think it's close, but I would like the aerial threat of Gabriel, and the fact that Alisson's out for the next couple of weeks slightly reduces his value, Van Dijk's. And then Bailey versus Morgan Gibbs-White, that's a bit of a toss-up. Bailey, we know what he's like. Short time on the pitch is needed to return. Morgan Gibbs-White is more of that nailed player, that kind of consistent player, but that injury also plays into it. So even if it was Van Dijk and Morgan Gibbs-White, I'm going Gabriel and Bailey. Next one is a 3 versus 3 trade, and that's Gabriel again, Eze, and a random forward, and never mentioned who. I'm going to assume they're not playing, for Nathan Collins, Mbeumo, and Mateta. So in this trade, let's assess it first. Defender versus defender. Obviously, Gabriel dominates Collins. So let's take it as like our 2 best players versus the 2 best players. Gabriel and Eze versus Mbeumo and Mateta. Because that forward spot might be able to fill it, probably not. But the defender spot in Collins, yes, he's great going forward for the short term, but eventually he's going to be wavered out. Yeah, Collins versus that forward spot, Collins is probably going to win that in the short term, but you never know. You could get a striker later on that kind of mitigates that. So you're already slightly behind. But let's go Mbeumo and Mateta versus Eze and Gabriel. I want, and we'll start Gabriel every day. Eze is very undervalued because he's been playing poor and Palace haven't been great. So I can see why people go Mbeumo and Mateta, but Mateta didn't start the last day. Now when he did come on, he was brilliant and he was one of the bright sparks for Palace. But even if it's slightly reduced minutes and Nketiah can play up top and on the wing, I'm going to go with Gabriel, Eze, and hopefully fill that striker spot. Because I think the only person I want for the rest of the season guaranteed in that other trade is Mbeumo. Whereas in the first one, I know I have Eze and Gabriel for the rest of the season, no matter what. And then finally, 1v1, McNeil or Johnson. And I suppose the short answer here is, in the short term, McNeil, yeah. But I think long term, Brennan Johnson with Spurs will, and I know he's in a rich vein of form and it's very easy to say him now, but I think even if he dips in form, he's going to pick up them goals and assists slightly easier than Dwight McNeil. Dwight McNeil does have a very, very good delivery and he will get his returns, but I think as a baseline, I think Brennan Johnson will pick up more points even when they lose or they're playing a tough side. So hopefully, maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but these are the players that I would personally go for. Before we get into our waivers this week, I'm going to look at a little section where I evaluate the values of players, at the theoretical values, as we always talk theoretically in the draft. Players that I think have good value or might be undervalued, and players that are overvalued. So green arrows representing players that I think you could get slightly undervalued right now, and then the players in the red arrow are obviously players that I think are really, really overvalued and you might have to give more than they're worth. Again, I'm not saying that these players aren't going to smash it in terms of the overvalued. I just think they're slightly inflated right now. So let's have a look at our undervalued or decent value picks. And starting off with Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro was very, very highly rated at the start of the season. He has definitely dipped, but he still has 3 returns. Spurs are never going to keep that many clean sheets, but they don't have a bad run of fixtures over the next while. They have West Ham, Palace, Villa, Ipswich, City, Fulham, Bournemouth. So over the next, 7, 8 games, they might keep some. And he's still getting in those attacking positions. 1.5 expected goals involvements. He only has the 1 so far. So, game or 2, we can expect another return for Porro. Phil Foden, I think it's self-explanatory. We talked about him a while ago. Phil Foden still not getting consistent minutes, but looks like he could be back on the way, back on the gravy train FPL points wise. So Phil Foden, if you can get him just before he starts getting consistent minutes, I think that's good value. Maybe people might be a bit wise to it coming into that good run, especially since the last start as well. One player that is definitely going under the radar is Anthony Gordon, and he could have had way more returns. He missed a penalty as well. If we look at his returns so far, he's only 2 returns, 2 goals. His expected goal involvements is 4.2. So again, a lot of that comes from the penalty, but I think the run of fixtures and the valuation, I think Anthony Gordon to get into your team for the rest of the season would be a great pick. Semenyo, and people might be saying, sure, he's not over. Everyone thinks that he's good value, but I think, or bad value, I suppose. I think it's because the narrative around normal FPL always comes into people's thinking when we're in the draft. So everyone's selling Semenyo in normal FPL now. So maybe some draft managers are thinking, geez, I have to get rid of him as well. He's coming into them bad fixtures. But more than likely, these players that you're going to get in this section, you'll probably keep in your team for the rest of the season. They're unlikely to be waivers. So if you can get Semenyo, I still think if he gets over that, hump of Arsenal, Villa, and City for the rest of the season, I'd be delighted to have him. Next up is Larson, and again, that's all to do with fixtures. He's been tipping away nicely. I think he's 3 returns, as far as I'm aware. But it's hard to look past that fixture run. There's like 7 or 8. We'll talk about them in the waivers. He's got 2 goals, 1 assist. Expecting goal involvement's not amazing, but like there's game week 10 to 17. You can start him every day. That's a serious chunk of the season, and I still think he is slightly undervalued. And then finally, Højlund. Any United players undervalued right now because of their performances. They have some decent fixtures coming up. Højlund started the last day, and I think to get him as a starting striker over the line could help you down the line in terms of starting 11. You might be under less pressure if you have a Højlund. On to our overvalued assets. And again, they're brilliant players and they will continue to do well. But Mbeumo is like one of the hottest assets in the draft right now. So if you wanted to like get a Foden, Mbeumo could be in a trade there somewhere. People will give a lot to get Mbeumo. I'd still love to keep him. It'd be so hard to give away. You'd have to take a risk, and I still think he's going to do really well. But this is the game. We're going to have to risk something if we want to improve. And then Dwight McNeil. They have a serious run of fixtures over the next while. Dwight McNeil has 3 goals, 2 assists. And their next games are Ipswich, Fulham, Southampton, West Ham, Brentford. So if you're a McNeil owner, this is the perfect time to own him. But after that, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, City, 4 in a row that you're going to be like, oh, Jesus. So if you did want to take a chance and get off the McNeil train right now, upgrading to trying to get a Gordon would be unbelievable. He's someone you're not going to have to worry about no matter the fixture. And then finally, Van de Ven. A lot of players have been sending me trades regarding Van de Ven and so on and so forth. I think, if you're getting a decent, solid defender that you think will get clean sheets, trading Van de Ven right now probably could be a very good decision in the future. On to our waiver section of the podcast, and we're looking at keepers. We haven't looked at them in a while, but that Allison injury has left the door open, obviously, for Kelleher to come in. A bit of a no-brainer if you don't have a keeper, playing keeper, if you want a second one. But let's look at him versus Hermansen of Leicester. Now, someone else asked me about Muric of Ipswich, and it kind of can be substituted in. Obviously, Hermansen is doing slightly better, but let's look first and foremost at fixtures. And if we're looking at the Liverpool fixtures, they're really tough over the next 6. The estimated time that Kelleher is going to be in there: Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa, Southampton, City, and Newcastle. Realistically, maximum 3 clean sheets in there, and that'll be doing very well. If we look at Hermansen's fixtures, and again, fixtures aren't everything when you're picking a keeper from a poor side. Southampton, Forest, Ipswich, United, Chelsea, Brentford, West Ham, Brighton, Newcastle, Wolves. There's a couple of relatively easy fixtures in there, but that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for clean sheets. Hermansen has 21 points, which is the exact same as Ederson of City so far. The majority of his points have come from saves. He has, I think it was 33 saves. 33 saves already this season. And his points per game, or his saves per game, sorry, is 4.71. So he's on average making nearly 5 saves per game. His expected points is around the 3 mark per game. And he's only getting a 0.2 clean sheets per game. So they're not coming from clean sheets. And I'm not saying 21 points is amazing. He's going to solve all your problems. But again, it's just highlighting the fact that some of these Murics, Hermansens could be brilliant keepers that you put in, they get you 3 points, and some days it can get you 8. Trying to pick and choose between some of them might be hard sometimes. Trying to pick, Martinez has a good game week this week, then Hermansen. Sometimes pick and stick for some of these keepers is the best way. When that is coupled with a good fixture, you could be on for a haul. Kelleher is a good option, but are you going to start him against Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa, Southampton, City, Newcastle? I would start him in maybe 4 of those games, and hopefully the defence holds up. He's a good keeper, but I have Hermansen, and I'm delighted to keep him for the next while. On to our defenders. We're looking at short-term defenders, so about 3 games roughly. You can get in and you can put back on the waiver. First up is Matty Cash. He is back to full fitness, started the last day. Hopefully he continues to start, not guaranteed, but that Konza injury kind of does help his chances. They play Fulham away and Bournemouth at home, both are very good sides this season. So, on another year that could be 2 clean sheets, but not necessarily. He does have some good attacking threats. So looking at his stats from last year, 2 goals, 2 assists, but he had 4.28 expected goals. He had 2.46 expected assists. So on stats, he could have had 4 more returns last year, which would have been very, very decent for, I think he only started like 27 games or something like that. And he created 6 big chances. So if you're looking for a decent side that possibly you might keep longer term, but start off with the 2 games, Matty Cash, great option. Looking at Everton, and again, we always recommend them, but initially looking at the trend of Everton's goals conceded, starting from game week 1 up to now: 3, 4, 3, 3, 1, 1, 0. So it's actually naturally coming down. They're improving slightly. That probably is to do with fixtures as well. And now we have them fixtures continued. We have Ipswich, Fulham, and Southampton. So hopefully them zeros continue. The 2 options here are Young and Tarkowski. Obviously, Brathwaite long term if he is back, but going on current information, Young and Tarkowski. Now, if we're looking at the stats, Young has 2 assists. Okay, he's got 2 returns in 2 games, 3 returns in 3 games actually, but his expected goal involvement is 0.4, whereas Tarkowski's is 0.9. So yes, Young always has that ability, like a free kick or whatever, but Tarkowski on probability, on stats, is nearly due a goal. So hopefully in the next 3 fixtures we can have a Tarkowski clean sheet and goal, but either or are good options for 3 games in a row. That's kind of a dream waiver. Defender, 3 games, don't have to worry about it. Kind of on the same sort of trend is our Leicester boys, again, following on from Hermanson. Southampton, Forest, and Ipswich. So again, two promoted teams. They're both away from home, which is the issue, and both them teams need points. So it's not as juicy as it looks, but FaZe and Justin are the two picks. Justin obviously for the attack and threat, kind of like the Young and Tarkowski idea. FaZe for the headers. I'd probably be picking Justin myself, but FaZe for a 3-week defender is a decent option as well. On to our defenders midterm, and we're doing a slight recap because two of the players we mentioned last week are on it again. Have to start off with Collins with that haul goal and an assist. I think he got some bonus as well. They play United, but they have a really, really good run after that. And we're looking at like 4 or 5 games that you can have these Brentford boys, Collins and Van der Berg. And, you can be happy enough to start them in your team. United, Ipswich, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, and Leicester. So, 5 games there. 3, you'd be looking at a clean sheet if they solidify slightly more. They haven't been great, especially away from home. But as we see the team settle more, we might see that kind of old Brentford that are hard to beat, that don't concede much goals. And hopefully Collins can pick a couple of more goals up. On the same vein, I talked about 8 Nori the last 2 weeks. Semedo is the man we're talking about this week because I'm presuming 8 Nori's picked up. They do play City this week, so you're kind of picking them up preemptively. You're kind of stashing them for the next game. After that, they are playing Brighton, Palace, Southampton, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham, Ipswich, Leicester. As I said, that 10 to 17 game week run is one of the best that any team has this season. Not necessarily meaning that they're going to translate into points, but if we play the fixtures, Wolves are the team to be targeting slightly. Finishing off with defenders, 3 long-term defenders, 2 of which I've practically already talked about. Porro is one of those. We said that there's 7 or 8 games over the next while that you could possibly look forward to a clean sheet in, but he has that 1.5 expected goal involvements and then positions that he's taken up. Really, really, really productive. And the fact that Johnson is playing so well, you can imagine Porro getting a dodgy assist where he just passes the ball to him, Johnson bangs, and hopefully we translate that into some FPL points. 8 Nori has been a hero the last 2 weeks. I picked him up, thank God. 2 assists, I think it was the last day, or goal and assist, I cannot remember. Feels like ages ago, but one of the top defenders for that mid-season stretch, 10 to 17. Don't get too overhyped because after that they have again a crazy tough run like they had at the start of the season. So yeah, 8 Nori as a waiver, I wouldn't be giving away someone like a Porro for an 8 Nori because Porro, I think he can kind of keep the season, whereas 8 Nori will be really, really high and valuable for that stretch, but then might plummet. One person, again, who's a steady Eddie in your team that might be going under the radar is Shar. Since that red card, he has 2 out of 4 returns. So in the 4 games he's played, 2 returns, clean sheet, and a goal as far as I believe. He is always really, really high in expected goal involvements in FPL. I think there was a stage there where it was like every 5 or 6 game he was getting a goal involvement. I think that was like 2 seasons ago. He will solidify Newcastle. They haven't been amazing, but I think with Shar in the team, they get slightly better. So obviously going under the radar, red card game week 1, I think it was, that -2, and then missed a couple of games. So people might be keeping an eye on him. I think if he's there and you have a free space, it's definitely worth a pickup. On to our midfielder picks, and we're looking at 6 specific players here. If you're in a smaller league, maybe some of the earlier this or that are more applicable to you. If you're in a slightly larger size, maybe 10, 12 plus, these could be the players that you're targeting. But let's start off with our Leicester boys. 3 okay fixtures, 2 very good in terms of attacking, and then that Forest in the middle of Southampton and Ipswich might be slightly tougher. But players that we've talked about throughout the season, now looking like they're kind of a bit more solid when they've actually eventually come to these fixtures. 3 players that we've picked out is Buenanote, Mavidi, and Ndidi. Laughing just at the pronunciation of Mavidi. If you've been listening, and I've been struggling with that big time. But if I had to rank them, I'm going Buenanote, Mavidi, and Ndidi. This is because Buonanotte, yes, he has been in and out of the team, but I remember the last international break, they said that he was training by himself because he needed extra fitness, and he looks like he could be up to that fitness. He might get the 90 every day, unlike Ndidi, but he has many different ways to get points, and I think he's a bit more solid in terms of probability of getting points. Maybe I'm being a bit biased because I liked him at Brighton, but a VD putting down as my second because of really attacking winger and has showed good underlying stats this season. And indeed, he unfortunately putting third, even though he's got 4 assists already this season. His stats aren't amazing. I think he's been played more advanced than usual, but if Buonanotte is starting, indeed he might be slightly deeper and less likely to be in them attacking positions. So if I was picking out of these three, indeed, he's probably the most solid. You know he's going to play. But if I was going for it, I'd go Buonanotte and Mavidi just slightly ahead of him. Going on past returns, yes, indeed, he's the best, but I think that's not always going to stay that way. 4 returns in 7 games is absolutely amazing. The other midfielder is our boy Lewis Potter, and he's come out at the top of the battle between him, Shade, and Carvalho. Other two are decent options, but again, in terms of solidified, Lewis Potter, left wing position, and slightly more advanced than he has played previously. He'd be the man to go for just because I know he's guaranteed minutes. Shada, yes, got a start and got 60 something minutes. Carvalho banged a goal but didn't start. Lewis Potter would just put your mind at ease. And they play United, as I said, not even the worst fixture. Ipswich, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, and Leicester. So you can keep him for a nice little chunk and start him for most days. Finally, we are going to our big boys, the City boys. And although City are notorious for, having really, really exciting players, these two go under the radar a lot. Kovacic, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and last week he banked 2 goals. His average position on the pitch is actually really, really high just because how much possession City have. So he always is in them positions to have long range shots. And then Bernardo Silva has only not started 1 game this year, 90 minutes in every other game. Yes, players are coming back. KDB might be back from injury. Foden has started. Gundo is there. But I think as kind of an easy waiver from a good team, guaranteed minutes, he's overlooked a lot. He's 3 returns already this season, and he'll probably tip along with them 5s and 6s every couple of games. In terms of their points, Bernardo Silva has 0.5 assists per game, which is actually unbelievable, and has around 4 expected points per game, which is, again, really, really good. Kovacic not too far behind, 2.56. Either are good options. I think your higher ceiling, Bernardo, your solid pick that you know you're going to get 2 or 3 points from every day with the chance of him banging 2 like he did last week. Kovacic is that man. And finally, on to our forward section. We've done a lot of ranking of forwards over the last couple of weeks, so and it hasn't changed that much. If you're looking for them, have a look back at last week's video and just have a feel for where we are ranking particular players at the minute. Hoyland, Isaac, undervalued, Watkins and Solanke and Havertz all in there as well. Looking at players that are definitely going under the radar, that might in the future be an okay pick if you're looking for a playing striker. If you have an Archer, if you have a Muniz who's not starting anymore. Gakpo, although I've slated him this season, played very well the last day. I think there will be more game time incoming, but I don't expect him to keep that left wing spot indefinitely. I think it's going to be, as we've seen, cameos. But there has been really, really good words from him from the Liverpool camp. And yeah, I just don't think you should overvalue him. I don't think you should be like, oh, Gakpo's in there now. Boom, I got a perfect forward. Let's throw away a starting forward for Gakpo. I think it's going to be slightly similar. Every couple of games he'll get the start. He'll get his 30 minutes off the bench. If that's enough for you, fine. 2 other players that are kind of similar. Fulkrug, struggling with niggles, might come back into the team as we said at the start this week, but it'll probably be game week 9 or 10. And even at that, Antonio's playing really, really well. So these are kind of more, you're kind of banking on them to get back in the team. They're not players that are going to make immediate effects. Wilson is someone exactly like that. If he was fit, he might have been a decent option this week, but He doesn't look like he will be fit. And you know what he's like? He'll play 2 games, bang twice, and get injured again. But him as a replacement for a non-playing striker with the possibility of him playing some games to give Isaac a rest, or if Isaac gets injured, could be okay. Um, Newcastle haven't looked great when they haven't had that focal point up top. So, yeah, these three are kind of more gambles than anything, but in the future, they might get you a goal to win a game week. I don't think I'd be getting rid of any consistently starting forward for them. But yeah, if you need a replacement for a non playing forward, these are the boys. That is us. Game week 8 done and dusted. As always, thank you so much for listening and watching, especially if you've made it this far. Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, all the crack. Subscribe. That is us. Game week 8 done and dusted. FPL Draft you out. Boom.